What is going on, Summit Chasers, and welcome to another episode of the Summit Chasers podcast. I'm very excited for you to listen to this one. A Mr. Walter Crosby and his insights on hiring for sales roles, and I mean any sales role from management, outside sales, cold callers, AEs, you name it. It's really spectacular, and some great tidbits from how to attract the right candidates and repel the ones that are less likely to be a good fit for your team, all the way to the interview process and even tips on how to offer top prospects the position and increase the likelihood that they'll accept the offer. Now, this topic of talent density is a big one for us in what we do at Summit Chasers. So please sit back, get your notebook out, take notes, grab a snack like some cheese and crackers, and maybe grab your Perrier to wash it down as well, and enjoy the show.
I think being intentional about anything, whether it's personal or business, is really going to ferret out issues before they become something of
Mm.
significance, and it also allows you to pivot. Right,
Yeah.
you start to see something that like, oh wow, that's not what I thought, and you can navigate in a different direction.
Yeah. Well, and setting those expectations too, like up front. Like if you're communicating to me like this is how I feel about it, right? And so then this is how we're going to have this conversation. Like setting very clearly setting those expectations, and also setting like clearly like this is what you're in charge of, this is what I'm in charge of. Like,
Yeah,
and don't like, and if something overlaps, then we need to talk to each other as business partners, not fiance. I don't know what the fiance is, and and then when we're done that conversation, then we can put the, like you said, we need a hat, like we might, or a sticker that I slap on my forehead sometimes, or that she slaps on my forehead sometimes, and
I think the hat makes it easier because then there's less
that makes
there's
it much easier. Yeah,
there's
the
less
hat's much.
snacking.
Yeah, or yeah. I mean, no, the hat would be much, or just the same hat. Just get like the Velcro piece, and I can just take out like a bunch of Velcro pieces. There's lots of options, Walter. We can talk
Yeah,
through. We can talk through a lot of options,
but it, but
but
it, but it, you do have to focus. You do have to maintain that intention and intentions and expectations. It's just like any other business thing, right? If
yeah,
you're coaching somebody, if you're working with somebody, you got to lay out the groundwork before you move forward.
yeah, absolutely. It needs to be very, very clear. Like, what is a pass? What is a fail? So if they do fail, it's not a surprise to anybody. And if they do pass, they know the rewards that they can succeed. And then after they hit that reward, okay, what's the next? What's the next kind of step? What's the next? I call it the next summit, but yeah. Um, but anyways, I really appreciate you coming on. I was been looking forward to this conversation. And like I was telling you earlier, I was on your website, and I think that the topic is not like this specific topic. Like we talked to, like I told you, I talked to a lot of sales individuals. I've been in a lot of sales. I've done a lot of sales training. I've done that kind of stuff. But the topic specifically around hiring and promoting in a sales org and what happens before and after, I don't think is talked about enough. Because like you said, and I 100% agree, hiring for a sales role, whether it's a leadership or a frontline or even an SDR, is different than hiring for like customer service or a line worker or XYZ, whatever. Right.
Admin.
So, or an ad, any or big time where, and like the way you said it, but salespeople, like true salespeople, like that's who they are. We're a little weird. We're a little crazy in a few
Yeah.
different ways. Mhm. So
I,
we'll start off. Sorry, go ahead with whatever you're about to say. Just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, and you also have a book. I know that, so I want to make sure we get that out early.
oh, well, I mean, I've had 36 years in sales and sales management, and so I can attest to the fact that we're all a little crazy. And because if you think about it, we have to face things that other employees don't. So when there's an admin in the office or an engineer working on something, there isn't somebody from the outside coming in and knocking stuff off their desk or hiding files. We have to deal with hostility. We have to deal with just apathy. People don't want to change. We have to go create something. And I'm not looking for the violins to play for us, but it is different. So when we start to think about salespeople and bringing them in, we have to approach salespeople differently. It's like, a dog and that you don't know. You don't just run up and grab the dog and start hugging them. Everybody's got to smell each other and check each other out to
Yeah.
make sure it's okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that I've during interviews over my career, I've controlled interviews um, where I shouldn't have been allowed to do that just because of the skill set. So it's there's a lot of variables there. So that's why I say when we're approaching hiring salespeople or promoting salespeople to a different role, then it really requires some thoughtful intention.
Hmm. So when you say controlling the interview, are you saying you as the interviewer shouldn't have been able to control the interview, or can you elaborate a little bit on that?
As the candidate,
Okay.
when I was looking for a gig and I was being interviewed, I shouldn't have been able to control the interview. The interviewer, it's much like a salesperson talking to a prospect.
Hmm.
Prospect should feel like they're in control if we're doing things well, but they're not. If we're doing following our process and our methodology is effective and efficient, we're asking questions and not talking, and they're talking, right? And we're gathering information and intel. That's how it should work with a candidate. So, we look at trying to flip that switch and give enough, and it's a terrible analogy, but give that candidate enough rope, shoot themselves in the foot or hang themselves, however you want to look at it, so that we really see who they are. And that requires some discipline from an interviewer. It requires intent of knowing where we want to go with the questions and knowing what a good answer is and what's a bad answer. I mean, I had an interview yesterday with a woman who um, was late, just didn't show up on time, um, and then it wasn't her fault, right? So lack of responsibility on her part, um, and and then I asked a question that was a simple yes or no question that she never answered. So when she got to the end of her ramble, I'm like, I ask a yes or no question. So I'm confused. Is it a yes or a no? And then she went on again to not address my question because she didn't have a good answer for it. So I think those are things that we most, a lot of hiring managers in the sales area haven't been trained in a structured process.
Hmm.
They haven't been trained how to keep bias out of, we're humans, right? There's always going to be some bias, but we shouldn't allow bias to really get in our way of making a good decision. I had a friend from college who um, worked for a very large bank right out of school. And her and I graduated from the University of Michigan, and she had a disdain for Notre Dame, which is a great institution with really smart kids coming out of it. But if she saw a resume who applied to this bank that had Notre Dame on it in any capacity, she threw it away. And that's an example of extreme bias. But those that types of bias seep into our world. So I think there's a lot of responsibility from the hiring um, manager, the company, to put some structure in place when we're looking at everybody, but specifically with salespeople, that if an HR person is asking a question about sales and they don't know what an A answer is, a B answer, or a C answer is, that's on the company to give it to them,
Hmm.
to help them understand how to rate that.
Yeah. Well, and I love it. Kind of want to go. You made a great point. A lot of the hiring managers, I mean, in companies, maybe you don't have a hiring manager, maybe the managers are the ones hiring them. But the point is that they don't have a structure that they follow consistently. Therefore, they don't have something to test the data against because there is no data at that
Right.
point. So where, and a lot, one of the things that I've seen is an issue is they don't have it clearly defined really what it takes to be successful in that role that they have, right? Or successful in their company as a sales professional. Like they know that, okay, I have 10 people, these three are amazing, these five are okay, and these other, I don't know the math, other three or whatever are poor. But I don't know what is the difference between these top three and these middle five. What's the difference between these middle five and these bottom two? And then use that to create an avatar to, this is what I need to go find. So what, when it comes to building that structure, right? When it comes to sourcing, so before even the interview, what type of framework or what advice would you give to business owners on creating that structure from how I source to select to when I'm offering the job?
Well, we start from the very beginning. So if you have a sales role that you want to fill, my first question is, what do you want that person to do every day, every week, every month? And their answer is, we want them to sell. And I'm like, to whom? How? Is this a business development role? Is it a hunting role? Are we giving them six accounts that we want them to grow by 20%? Are we giving them six accounts that we don't want them to screw up? Like, what's the role? And they typically like, well, I never thought of it like that. Like, okay, well, start. And and that's often where it the foundationally there isn't enough meat on the bone for them to write a good ad. There isn't enough information to know when they hit the target because they're flying by the seat of their pants. So we start with not a job description, but what are we actually looking at for them to do? Um, and that leads into like the activities. Who are they calling on? Like who the ideal client profile that this person is going to call on? Who is it? What industry are they in? What industries? Right? Let's define all of that. Is that realistic? Is that enough? Is it too much, or is it enough for somebody to earn a living in this role? Does the comp plan align with the activities that you want them to do? Um, you know, I mean, I've seen comp plans that are all over the place. I mean, they've actually paid people to do proposals. I've seen it once. They paid people to write quotes and proposals. Like, I could get rich just writing proposals. Like, there's no qualification, right? They were just paying people to do proposals. So so like, let's get the role right. Let's figure out what those activities are, how we're going to measure them. I want to understand all of that so that, because typically I help them through the hiring process. I teach them a way to do this so that they can go do it themselves. But it always starts at the beginning. And then we write an ad that attracts the candidates that we're looking for and repels the candidates we don't want.
Mm-hmm.
So we're literally trying not to waste time throughout this process.
So how do you do that? Sorry, I want to sit on that for just a second. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off if I did. How do you, so that ad, and that's, I love that topic in itself, because a lot of them, they just put out like a regular, like it's just a boring job description that could attract somebody from this background, this experience level, this education, and it's not specific. So I love what you just said, which is that it repels those that wouldn't be a good fit. So how do you, and maybe you're going into that, so sorry if I cut you off, but
No,
how do you write that? How do you write that description? You don't give me
very
word for
fair.
word, but yeah.
It's a much shorter job description. So at a high level, and very simply, is that we're writing an ad that when the individual that we're looking for reads it, they're thinking, oh, I do that. I'm pretty good at that.
Mhm.
I know those kinds of people. Wow, I'm awesome at that. Maybe I should apply for this job.
Mhm.
Right? That's what we're looking for. It's called a Shackelford style ad. So there was a back in the, I don't know, early 1900s, late 1800s. This guy left England and he wrote an ad that was to try to attract sailors because he was going to Antarctica. Right?
Mhm.
So his ad was descriptive about very um, exciting journey, right?
Mhm.
Incredibly dangerous. You might not come back, but if you do, there's lots of glory, right? So it was a real simple ad. So it was looking for that particular sailor who could handle the rough seas and that journey, but and was willing to take the risk for some glory. And so it's that essence that we're looking for. So it doesn't look like that traditional job description. You go on
Mhm.
Indeed or any job board, you'll see like, here are the list of responsibilities and accountabilities, and it's like boring because they
Mhm.
all say the same thing. And our ads are going to be written to the sense of, you know, you need to have experience calling on municipalities in some capacity. You need to have experience and be comfortable calling on, director level public works department. We want to tell them who they're going to call, what the industry's like, but also the adjacent industries. So what I mean by that is, if you're looking to fill a role where somebody is selling payroll services, and having somebody to have payroll service experience would be great, but who do payroll services people call on, right? They're looking at controllers, CFOs, finance people, right? HR people. So what other industries call on those same people? Because we can teach them the payroll business, but do they know how to talk to these people? Do they know how to talk to that CFO, that controller, that HR person? Right? That's what's important. Do they have a Rolodex? Right? I'm showing my age with the Rolodex, but do they have um, those connections where they could go out and start calling on people and say, "Hey, I'm doing this now." Right? So that's what we're looking for. So experience is great, but experience at what? Most companies like, well, they gotta be in my industry and they gotta know because we're unique. Right? Everybody's unique. Right? It's security systems or security systems, payroll services or payroll services, features and benefits, sure, but it's being able to know who you're talking to and be able to speak the language that they speak. It's not about you; it's about your prospects' problems. So, we're trying to shift the client's mindset. We want that business owner to switch how they're looking at this role. Be really clear about what you want them to do. Right? A hunting role is wildly different than an account manager role. And even within account management, there's differences. So being able to discern if it's a CSR role or a pure hunting role, and how much service is involved, we need to be able to share all of that information in the ad in a very succinct manner. Our ads are traditionally pretty short. Um, Sometimes we add things about culture if somebody's serious about culture, but we want them to understand reality. We're not trying to hide. We're not trying to oversell. And that, I think, is one of the things that people do wrong from the giddy up, is try to sell the role in the company to the candidate when they don't even know if this person's the right person. So we ask the folks to not sell the role until the end. Until you have those two or three candidates that you're really serious and you really think are a good fit, go sell it then. Don't sell it to the person that you're just doing a phone screen with, that you're not sure has what it takes. There's a great story about a client who they had a really high paying job. Right, the base was like 350, 400,000, but the person could make about $1.5 million if they hit their numbers. So they had a very specific person in mind, but the place where they worked was a dump. So they were encouraged to create a nice little conference room right off the lobby that was well done. It had the right furnishings, wasn't over the top. They had a picture of the founder on the wall. Right, this older gentleman. So they would put the candidate in the room. This was like orchestrated, like a theater. They put the candidate in the room, offered him the coffee, and then a couple of minutes later, the senior sales leader came in and said, "I see you're looking at our founder, Mr. So-and-so, right?" And they told him the story. He comes in on a regular basis. He's not really involved in the sales department. He's really focused on engineering and research and in the products. So they start the interview process, and about 10 minutes in, the old man on the wall walks in, looks at the candidate, says, "Sorry, I'm for interrupting." And he sticks out his hand to the candidate. It's like, "Steve, I heard a lot of good things. Really hope you make the right decision and join our team." And then left. So a bit of theater,
Yeah.
but they really wanted this guy. and they created this environment to make him feel like they wanted him because he was the right fit. So I tell you the story because they were really clear, like that was the only guy that fit,
Hmm.
right? So they went to some extremes to make sure that they had the right candidate in place.
So they got to the point where they knew that he was the guy and they wanted to sell him. So they put on this almost experience, theater like performance for him type of thing.
But they
Okay.
had discerned and disqualified all the other candidates, and
Mm,
that was the first time they sold the role. They sold the
gotcha.
company, and I
Mm,
think if we do that at the end, we're not wasting time. We're
okay.
not putting that
Mm,
sort of effort into somebody along the way. I mean, when I've done interviews where I was the candidate in the past, the first thing they do is start telling me about the company. First,
mm,
I should know about the company if I'm a viable candidate. I should have done some research. I should have some
mm.
questions. But like, let's talk about the role. Let's see if there's a fit before you start selling me.
Yeah. Well, so I see what you're saying. So they make the mistake, or a lot of people will make the mistake, companies will make the mistake of doing that way too soon. They'll start selling people on the dream. Like, and I've seen that a lot before too, where it's, the job entails, maybe it's a lot of driving, a lot of travel, a lot of long hours. You're not going to see your kids and your family as much, but they sell them on, like they're almost, like that's almost like a point of, like they're self conscious about it, right? So they try to hide it with like, yeah, but you could, 0.5% of our sales reps have made $500,000, so this is what you could do. So they sell that, and then
Right.
they don't even know if they're the right fit. They could have 10 other candidates coming behind them that are a much better fit. So I
So
definitely see what you're saying.
let's figure out who's really a good fit. Who should we invest some time and resources in? And that starts to reveal itself through a process of
Mm-hmm.
interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And but initially we want to be screening them
Mm-hmm.
from the very beginning. But we can't do that unless we know what we want them to do. So in your
Yeah.
scenario about lots of travel, that should be in the ad.
Mm-hmm.
This role requires 70% travel, or this role requires, you know, 12 days a month on the road.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's going to repel certain people. Because if they're not going to be a fit long term, why do we want to engage them to begin with?
Yeah.
It's about finding the right candidates, not talking to the most people.
What do you say to the companies that, and I've seen this a lot, where they get, I call it like the warm body syndrome, right? Where they're growing really fast, or maybe they've had a mass, you're shaking your head. You have some tells, Walter,
Yeah,
where
I have a
they,
hard time hiding my feelings.
which is, I mean, you're passionate about it, which I absolutely respect, or they're going into a new market or whatever, but they need to hire quickly, is my point. And they start to, they have a process, and then they're like, yeah, but we need to get 10 people in here in the next month, whatever, XYZ amount of time. What would your advice be to them to either a speed up the current process they have and not ignore what they currently have, to get the right, to give them the better chance? It's never 100%, but to give them at least the better chance of having the right candidates come through the door.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that you can do. You still want quality, but if you know and you're willing to accept a 40, 50% burn rate of your people, you have to understand what that means to the sales organization. You have to understand that you're going to be bringing people in and you're wasting time and money. So one of my questions is, are you willing to do that?
Mm.
And when they really start to think about what that means, maybe I don't need to get them all done in 4 weeks. Maybe I could do 6 weeks and do this a little better rather than fast. But
Mhm.
you can go faster if you have the support using the job boards, right? You're blasting this everywhere. You're
Mhm.
telling everybody. You got your employees telling everybody. You're giving your employees an incentive to tell people and bring them in. So if you're doing all of those things and you have the ability to process people quickly, right? Because if you want to go fast, then you better have enough people to handle that influx of candidates. So, and then be able to discern them. Don't alter the process of weakening it to make it go faster, but just support the growth that you're looking for in that capacity. So instead of having one person doing some screenings, you might need to have three. You might need to block out that time. You might, because you want to be able to get through this whole process in 2 to 3 weeks with a candidate.
Mm-hmm.
You either want to get them out or move them forward.
Mm-hmm.
In similar to a pipeline, right? You want some velocity. You don't want them sitting around waiting. We want to be clear what that process is. We want to tell everybody what that looks like, what each step is, and then here's how you're going to know if you make it to the next level. So there's a lot of that intention and expectations, like you talked about in the beginning, applies to this process as well.
Mm-hmm. So don't alter the process, but add people to support the process itself. That's what
Yeah,
speeds it up.
resources.
Okay.
You're gonna spend more money on ads. You're gonna advertise it more. You're we suggest $8 to $10 2 or 3 times a week, a day, to promote a project. You can escalate that so you get bigger reach. If you're
Mm-hmm.
remote, then that's going to open up your space as well, like up your candidate pool. So there's a lot of things that you can do to go grab more candidates, but it has to be within the confines of the opportunity that you have.
Understood. No, that's very, very good advice. Very good advice. Because I mean, their first reaction is like, okay, if we have like a 3-step interview process, let's only do one, as opposed to, okay, let's train, a couple other people that can come in and also do interviews, but keep that same process.
And if you have a process that's defined and written down, it's easier to train other folks to, ask the question and grade the question. If you
Mm-hmm.
know what a good answer is or a weak answer is, we can teach people to do that. And often that's going to bring a different perspective, right? It's going to help somebody see, if you have different people engaging with candidates, they're gonna see different things because they have their own viewpoint.
Yeah, own personality. And some people are more comfortable with certain personalities. They might be more honest with them. Um, no, that's a very good point. And also, I mean, I think it's just consistent. You just made the comparison of comparing it to a sales process. If that sales process isn't consistently executed on for a period of time, you don't have data to then know where to improve and what adjustments to make. Same thing with the hiring process. If that process isn't consistent, you don't have the data points to then make those 1 or 2% adjustments, which could make the difference between a 5 or 20% churn rate in the
Yeah.
long term, right? Yeah, no, that's great advice. So when it comes to actual the interview process, right? So we have a very clear defining the role, like defining not just okay, what is the sales role, but like very meticulously, what is the activities that they're going to be doing, what is the outcomes that we want them to achieve, right? So the difference between a cold caller and a hunter or a AE, or they're much different, right? Defining what that is really clearly, writing a description or a job ad that's very specific and repels, just as important, repels those that aren't a good fit and really attracts people that are. You get a good number of candidates in. What's like an ideal? And I know that there's a lot of different types of sales roles. So you're going to have, the people who are just cold calling, and they might not have as much of a extensive interview process, or maybe you'll prove me wrong, and it's just as extensive. And then you have, the people that, could be managing accounts worth, 1, 10, $20 million. But on average, what is a good that you've seen a good successful interview process look like? Like, is it 2 steps, 3 steps? Kind of where's your sweet spot that you've seen?
Well, if you think about it from the time a candidate engages to the time you make an offer, so you have that job posting. So there's an engagement there. But if you want to look at it, they send you a resume. So we use a tool that helps us define the uh, the the candidate's likelihood of success. We can predict success because it's a sales specific tool. So we use that to help us discern and disqualify people. So that's a second touch. And then we do a phone screen, which is very short, very specific. We're just looking to see if somebody can follow direction, if they're articulate, and do they have some really basic skill sets of ability to create rapport. They're 10, 12 minutes long at most. And then this is where there's a variable. There's at least one interview that's an hour to 90 minutes, um, that can be virtual or face to face. But this depends upon the company. There can be two, three of those face to face interviews with different people. So right there is a variable of, two or three steps.
Mm-hmm.
But then the last step would be that final interview with whoever gets to make that final blessing and say yes. And then we make the offer at that point. So that those steps are somewhere 4 to 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is dependent upon the complexity of the role and how many people need to touch them. Because sometimes we're looking for um, culture fit, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's really important. Like you could be the best salesperson for that role, but if you're an ass and you don't fit the culture and you really
Mm-hmm.
make everybody uncomfortable, it doesn't matter, right? It's just
Mm-hmm.
not going to work. Um, so we're looking for different things, and that's what we decide on the front end, because we want to tell the candidate in the very first communication, here's what the interview process looks like, and we try to get this done. And this is important. No matter how long it is, we want it to be done in 2 to 3 weeks. So we want to keep them moving. And if you're going faster and you want to hire more people, you can compress that. Try not to miss the steps. Do
Mm-hmm.
the same things, but just do it faster. And you can move people through if you have the right scheduling, if you have the right, everybody's committed the time, because that's often an issue. Like, well, I just don't have time to to talk to this candidate. Oh, we have to have the agreement on the front end. Like, it's not optional. You've blocked off these 2 hours to have conversations, and that's what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody has to be, that whole team has to be on the same page. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely makes sense. So and I think that'll be surprising to some people, how many steps that a good interview process entails. Because you said 4 to 6. I don't think there's a lot of them. I think most probably don't do more than two, right? Which, I mean, for some roles, I get it, but there's certain, like, especially like if you're an AE, like in that example, if you're an AE in charge of millions of dollars of accounts, and you aren't the right person and you lose this account, that could be millions of dollars out of the company's wallet, right? So that that interview process, and you're out there. One of the points you made that I love is that you can be a culture fit internally, but you need to be a culture fit internally, and you're also representing the company to the world. So you need to not just represent, you need not be a good culture fit internally, you need to represent what the company stands for externally.
Whatever that is, right? It's got to be. Some people are buttoned up with jackets and dress shirts, and some people are super casual. Like, whatever that is, it's not right or wrong. It's what the company wants to put forth, what the brand represents, right? So all of this thought has to go through this process, to bringing people in. And if you're getting the retention that you want, and you're getting the outcomes that you want, and you have a two-step interview process, God bless, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why change if it's working? But if it's not working, then maybe you should think about doing some sort of augmentation to that, um, trying something different. um, I had a friend who he was a boss, actually, that it's like, you've always eaten chocolate ice cream, try a little vanilla, you might like it, right? I actually heard them say that to a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Um, and it worked, right? Because the guy's like, you're vanilla. He goes, I'm more strawberry than I am vanilla. But my point is, do something different if you want different results.
Mm-hmm.
So if something's working, stay with it. But if it's not, or you want to get better at something, or you want to elevate your hiring, you want to elevate the quality of your team, then maybe you should do something different. Because one thing that I think business owners could spend more time contemplating is, when it comes to their sales team, you talked about it earlier on. Maybe you got two people that are killing it, hitting their numbers consistently, they're doing the right things. And then you've got, a couple of people at the bottom that miss on a regular. that just aren't getting it done. And then you got the middle group, right? They're working hard. Sometimes they hit it, sometimes they don't. They're just not consistent. So those people, let's try to spend some time coaching those people and giving them some tools and helping them try to elevate. But those bottom people, cut your losses, get rid of them, hire new people, because the people at the top or the people that are trying, that mediocrity that you're accepting as a business owner just kills the sales culture. Nobody that's performing likes to see anybody get away with, you know, half-assing it, that don't produce. Um, Producers are tolerant of people that are putting forth the effort and not having success. If everybody sees that they're trying the right things, but they need a little support, they need a little coaching, they're okay with, maybe even helping them themselves. But at the bottom, if somebody just doesn't show up and doesn't care, we just got through with uh, watching a lot of college football, and Nick Saban just retired. That was one thing that he preached on a regular basis was, no mediocrity. The system is going to ferret that out, and the players are going to, cause those folks that are dragging to work a little bit harder. If you don't have the right mentality, the right mindset, you're never going to be successful.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, and that's something that a lot of, whether it's business owners, managers, whatever it is, they're scared of is that bottom 10%. Because if you look at most companies, that's where they spend 80% of their time is on that bottom 10%. And this is a Jack Welch thing, former CEO of GE. He had the 20-70-10 rule, where you have the top seven, the top 20 who you compensate and you reward, you put crowns on their head, right? You make it, they almost seem like royalty. And then that bottom, or so that middle 70, you focus on getting them to the 20. Like that's where you spend most of your coaching time. But that
Mm-hmm.
bottom 10, every quarter, like it sounds heartless, but it's really not. Like if they're in the bottom 10 and you've put the effort into them, they're just not meant to be in that role. They're just not meant to be, and they'd be better off being successful somewhere else. So I know I love that point, and it's, sorry, go ahead.
You're 100% right. I mean, you could say what you want about Jack, but putting if you're sitting in the wrong seat, get them out as soon as you realize it, and
Mm-hmm.
and helps them get to the right seat, and
Mm-hmm.
helps you put somebody in the right seat.
Yeah, yeah, because and it like again, it's tough, but it's important that you recognize that sooner than later. Because imagine keeping somebody in a role where they're just not successful at, or they feel like they're failing all the time, or they're not making the money that they could maybe somewhere else in a different type of role, right? And then so as long as it's you recognize that and get them out, and support them in finding that other role. Sorry, go ahead.
100%. I mean, it's I had breakfast with a friend this morning and we talked about this. Um, when you were a kid, did they stop school because it was cold out? Was just
Not where I'm
because it was
from.
cold? Yeah,
Not
me
where I'm
neither.
from.
But like, it's been cold here where I live in Michigan, and they canceled school today, not because of snow, not because the roads weren't passable for the buses, because it was cold. And I think that speaks to a bigger issue. Holding people accountable is a positive thing. Holding people to a standard is a positive thing if you've told them what that standard is and you've given them the support that they need. But at
Mm-hmm.
some point, they don't want to do the work, then you got to let them go and go do something else.
That's the key, right? And I think that's why, a lot of one of the things I preach, with whether it's with our clients or on here, is as the leader, like you have to take that responsibility. Like if they're failing in that role, take the responsibility for it. Like don't just assume it's their fault. They failed in the role because of their incompetencies. Well, you put them there. You were in charge of creating the training to get them to be successful, and you were, it was on you, no matter what. Maybe it's the way you communicated in a way that resonated with person A, but didn't resonate with person B, and now person B is failing. And is that their fault because they didn't understand the way you communicated it, or is it on you, you didn't communicate it in a way that resonated with them? And then let's say you did do that and you communicated properly, and then they're just not the fit for the role. Well, you put them in that role that they weren't competent for to begin with. So that's on you. So now you have the ability to go and change the way you hired people. You have the way, change the questions you're asking, the way you're writing your descriptions and your Indeed ads.
You're right. I mean, it's everything falls at our feet as a CEO, as a
Mhm.
business owner. It's all ultimately our responsibility. But there's a it's like Park Avenue. It's a two-way street.
Mhm.
They have to put forth the effort, and it's up to us to meet that and to go there and make a determination. Like, I got to try because um, we have to be able to communicate the same idea multiple ways
Mhm.
as a leader to reach whoever it is we're trying to reach. And getting your vision clear as a leader doesn't matter if it's the vision for the company and your brand or if it's how we're going to hire. If you don't share that and communicate that well and make sure that they understand, that employee understands what they can do every day to live that and to help with that, then we failed as a leader.
Absolutely. And a lot of them are scared, whether it's ego, pride, whatever it is, they're scared to ask those questions and admit that to themselves. And then they don't make the adjustments. And then they're stuck in that, it's just that loop. Right.
Yep.
Um, I could talk to you. I feel like I could talk to you all day, Walter. This was a really great conversation. I think I'm going to have you on again because I have another kind of track I think we could take us down, but then we'd be here all day,
Yeah.
type of thing. Um, but
I
I
would.
absolutely appreciate the knowledge you clearly, and again, from just even the research I had before, I was very excited for this call. But there's a question that I ask everybody kind of near the end of the podcast. And for you, it's what is the next summit that you, Walter, are chasing right now?
In the context of the business,
You in general, personally, in business, what is the next thing that you're going after and you're trying to accomplish in your life?
there's I could be generic and talk about growth, but it's about upping my discipline and habits to because that ultimately defines where I go. So it's being more focused. We talked about this a little bit before we turned on the recording. Um, but I sometimes I get distracted. Oh, that would be cool if I did that. If that worked, that would be awesome. When we all know that there's certain basic things that we need to do, whether if you're trying to lose weight, you move around a little bit more, right? You maybe watch what you eat. Um, if you're trying to grow your revenue, you got to reach out to more people and have more conversations, and that requires some prospecting. So it's making my habits easier to achieve. So, quick example: get up and go walk at 5:30 in the morning. Right, my exercise is to go walk 3 miles. Um, so, what do I have to do to make that happen? I got to get out of bed, but I have to get dressed and get out the door. So I have everything ready to go. I don't have to think. I don't have to go looking around. I just go get dressed and I can be out the door in 10 minutes. So it's doing things like that, really thinking about your habit that you're trying to create because that's what's going to get you to the next summit.
Yeah, I think that our word for this podcast has been intentional. Do things intentionally, right? And you probably have, but a lot of people have, but I don't know if I see it behind you. But the book Atomic Habits, where he talks about habit stacking. So being intentional. So if you want to create a habit for anybody, but for your example, if you want to, it sounds like you have the habit, but if you want to make the habit easier of getting up and walking 3 miles at 5:30 in the morning, you stack habits on top of that to make that habit easier, right? So for you, as making
Better.
sure the habit would be to get your clothes ready, to get things ready, so that it's easier for you when you roll out of bed. Everything's there ready for you, right? Or you have the coffee set for 5:20. I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean. But like the habit stacking to make the thing that you're trying to change or the thing that you're trying to create easier.
That's a great point because part of that getting out of bed that early is going to bed earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which means sacrificing watching the end of a football game or having that extra glass of wine with my wife, whatever. It's like I'm doing this, and it stacking those things up to give you the power to do what you need to do. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a
There
great
was
point.
a good example. I think it's from the book. There was an example, but there was somebody who they wanted to go to bed earlier, and their bad habit that they were trying to break was they would watch TV way too late. And speaking of, you make the bad habits harder for you to achieve. So he started hiding. He would take the batteries at like after dinner. That was his habit stack, is he took the batteries out of the remote, and then he put the battery somewhere else. So now it became such an inconvenience to have to go find the remote and then go find the batteries, put the batteries in the thing to turn on the TV. So now it's so annoying. Then, but I put my book right where I can reach it. So now I'm reading my book instead of watching the TV. So it's like those little tricks that
Yeah,
you can intentional, but again, being intentional about it and stack those things on top of each other. It's interesting.
100%. And it's just
Beautiful.
a little bit of creativity to go where you go, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And make it fun. Make it, they're more likely to do it. But Walter, take 30 seconds, plug. I know, again, you have a book. I'll plug that in the intro as well. You have a plug, whatever you want to plug. Where can people find you? Anything else you have coming up? Go ahead.
The two places to find me, I think, are the website, helixsalesdevelopment.com, or LinkedIn. I'm really active on LinkedIn. I respond to my messaging on there. It's Walter L. Crosby. There's only one of me. So just if you have questions, if you have thoughts, I'm happy to have conversations with people. I'm really, really discerning. I don't pitch. If somebody calls me and says, "Hey, I got a question about. I heard you on the podcast, and I had a question about what you said." I'm happy to answer the questions and dive in without trying to pitch something. We do offer something called the Sales Hiring Secrets. It's a program where I teach that whole process in about 4 hours. You bring your whole team, and you get that whole overview really quickly and determine whether it's something you can pull off or not.
I
We do
love it.
that once a quarter.
And I highly recommend everybody watching to check them out. I'm on the website right now. There's even some great information on the website. And I think that this is, and I'm pushing this a lot, probably more than some, because this is something that I see as a big miss in a lot of companies, especially when you're looking at like the SMEs, where again, you fall into that. I brought it up before, the warm body syndrome. You just get people in. Right, you get a generic. Okay, they've been successful in sales before. Why not here? And then you just throw them in and slap them on the butt, and then away you go. But you don't. It's a little bit more difficult to quantify the repercussions of doing this poorly, because we don't look at that as a profit and loss consistently, even though there is tremendous loss when you have high churn. So I highly recommend checking them out. Walter, it was an absolute pleasure. Again, I'm probably going to have to twist your arm and get you on here again.
Happy to help, man.
Thank you for watching this episode of the Summit Chasers podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed, you were inspired, you learned something that you can use to go and chase whatever your next summit may be. Be sure to like and comment your takeaways from the episode below. Also, follow us on all social media platforms under Summit Chasers Network. And if you're watching this on YouTube, be sure to turn on your notifications so you can be notified when we drop new content like how-to videos, business best practices, motivation, and personal development strategies. And until next time, keep chasing your summit. I'll see you on the next one.